2:47 a.m., a Russian patrol vessel detected Ukrainian drones breaching protected airspace over Crimea. Within seconds, 5 missiles launched into the sky, burning through millions of dollars, but as the smoke cleared, the FPV drone remained intact, flying deeper inland. Its objective was clear: neutralize the air defense system surrounding Mount Apetry. Below on the beach, a Panzer S-1 battery swept its radar, fired off missiles, then switched to its twin 30mm autocannons. Tracer rounds lit up the night sky, visually stunning, yet utterly ineffective. The rounds never touched the target. The real reason was simple: the Ukrainian drones flew directly across the radar beam at only 50 meters altitude. At that angle, the radar could barely detect any closing or receding motion. Modern radars don't just see objects, they measure how fast they're moving toward or away. That's called radial velocity. When this velocity is near zero, the radar treats the object as a stationary echo, like a hill or a building, and filters it out. That phenomenon is called the Doppler notch. Worse still, reflected radar waves from the sea surface created ghost images beneath the drones. The radar's onboard computer tried to average between the real target and its reflection, and ended up locking onto the empty space between. The result? Russian missiles flew with perfect accuracy, but straight into nothing. That's why the Panzer battery failed to register the drones as valid threats. While the operator sat confused, unable to comprehend why their multi-million-dollar defense system had just gone blind, another swarm of drones appeared on infrared, approaching from multiple directions like a pack of metal hornets. Panzer detected them at a range of just 2 kilometers, but its missiles required at least 1.5 kilometers to arm and trigger their proximity fuses, while closing at a rate of roughly 40 meters per second. That left just 12 seconds between detection and flyover. 12 seconds to respond to threats the system was never truly designed to see. Across Russian radio channels, chaos erupted. Command called for air support. The Panzer crew reported failure to lock targets. Other units screamed that missiles couldn't acquire tracking signals. Everyone knew these weren't Tomahawks or fighter jets. Just slow, flying toys, no faster than a car. But somehow, they were completely invisible. 2:50 a.m., the lead drone gently banked, then plunged straight into the first radar dome. Inside that dome was a multi-hundred-million-dollar early warning radar, capable of tracking ballistic missiles in space, even detecting stealth aircraft, a key node in the defensive network over the entire Black Sea region. These domes were engineered to withstand 5,000-pound bombs dropped from 30,000 feet. But no one had ever imagined they'd be attacked by tiny civilian-grade devices flying at treetop level. Once the first drone struck its target, the rest followed, launching coordinated strikes on pre-designated radar sites. The Panzer operator could only freeze, staring at the screen in disbelief, just enough time to report system failure before his signal disappeared. The commander screamed in desperation, "Scramble the fighters, now!" Less than a minute later, a Su-30 fighter jet roared down through the night, the pride of the Russian Air Force, advertised as the answer to the American F-15. Equipped with thrust vectoring engines, a powerful radar array, and the ability to detect objects the size of a golf ball from orbit. But in the harsh reality of that night, the Su-30 couldn't even see the drones flying right in front of it. The pilot's BARS radar system, his primary tracking and missile guidance sensor, began displaying erratic data. On screen, target blips flickered in and out like fireflies in the dark. They appeared on one scan, but vanished on the next. By protocol, the radar needed 5 consecutive returns to confirm a contact as a real target. But these drones consistently dropped below the noise floor after just 2 or 3 pings. The noise floor is the ambient electronic static a radar always hears, like the hum in an otherwise silent room. If a signal's strength falls below that noise level, the radar can't distinguish it from background clutter, and essentially, the target becomes invisible. This forced the radar's tracking computer to restart its lock-on process over and over again. It was never able to collect enough data to generate a stable track file. Frustrated by the lack of lock, the pilot decided to fire anyway. An R-73 missile shot off the rail, screaming to life, accelerating to Mach 2.5 in seconds, a weapon worth 20 million rubles, designed to hunt down enemy jets in even the most complex dogfights. The drone's thermal camera recorded everything. The missile raced in, its seeker head scanning, and then suddenly it veered off, as if it had just remembered it had somewhere else to be. The reason? Heat signature. The R-73 homes in on jet exhaust temperatures, thousands of degrees of hot gases, detectable from 30 kilometers away. But a drone's electric motor? Barely 50 degrees Celsius, about as hot as a laptop. At that level, the infrared seeker can't detect the drone until it's within 500 meters. By then, the missile's already flying too fast to adjust its course. The pilot refused to give up. He launched a second R-73. It screamed past the drone. The explosion jolted the thermal camera, but again it missed. Even pulling 40 GS at Mach 2.5, the missile's turn radius is still 600 meters. And when you're attacking from just 2 kilometers away, and the target changes direction randomly every few seconds, there's simply not enough space to maneuver. In the end, physics doesn't care how advanced your weapons are. In desperation, the pilot launched a third missile, then a fourth. Within mere seconds, he had burned through 80 million rubles worth of munitions without scoring a single hit. But he still had one last weapon left to try, the GSH-30 cannon. At 2:52, he pulled the trigger. The GSH-30 roared, unleashing a steel storm, thousands of 30mm rounds at 1,500 rounds per minute tearing through the night sky. But not a single round hit its mark. The reason was brutally simple. The fire control computer had calculated the firing angle based on a straight-line trajectory of the target. What it didn't account for was that every 2 seconds the drones shifted 2 to 3 meters left or right, a movement so subtle it was nearly invisible. But over a distance of more than a kilometer, that tiny shift translated to a missed distance of over 10 meters. The computer was solving yesterday's equation, while the drones were constantly rewriting the math in real time. Meanwhile, 500 meters below, the first drone had reached its target, the 96L-6E radar, known to NATO as cheeseboard, mounted openly on a vehicle chassis. This was a critical tactical radar, feeding targeting data to the S-400 system, capable of tracking up to 100 targets at once and coordinating multiple simultaneous missile launches. Without it, the fearsome S-400s couldn't see past their own noses. 2:54, the drone's shape charge triggered. A jet of molten copper blasted out at 8 kilometers per second, piercing the intricate circuitry and creating electrical connections that should never exist. In a blink, millions of dollars of hardware were reduced to smoldering scrap. Out of missiles, the Su-30 pulled up hard, the pilot reporting failure to command. The fuel warning light blinked red. He had no choice but to return to base immediately. For missiles, hundreds of rounds, not a single hit. As the jet peeled away, more drones calmly flew toward Mount Ape Tri, meeting almost no resistance at all. But then, the pilot's radar suddenly picked up something strange. New signals began to appear, not from Ukrainian territory, but 10 kilometers off the Crimean coast, like ghosts rising from the sea. Ground command saw them too. While everyone was focused on the wave of incoming drones, they failed to notice the threat right in front of them. 10 kilometers offshore, a fleet of unmanned surface vessels, USVs, had been lying in wait. On each deck was a launch rig holding multiple FPV drones with no human crew aboard. These vessels, part of a new class codenamed Ursula, didn't even have official names yet. They had been sitting silently for over 2 hours, completely invisible to all radar stations on the mountain. And their secret wasn't technology, it was geometry. The Podlet K-1 radar perched atop Mount Ape Tri is capable of detecting aircraft at 300 kilometers, even tracking ballistic missiles in space. An impressive feat if you ignore one basic truth, trigonometry. The radar sat at an elevation of 3,600 feet, over 1,000 meters, with a minimum depression angle of just -2 degrees. Which means, by the laws of physics, it cannot detect any object lower than 43 meters tall within a 10-kilometer radius from the coastline. And the unmanned vessels? They stood barely 5 meters above the waterline. They didn't need to evade radar. They were swimming inside a blind spot, a natural dead zone the size of a small city, carved by physics itself. The moment the first drones knocked out the S-400 radars on the mountain, the Ursula-class USVs activated their launchers. Their electric motors whirred to life, unleashing a swarm that sounded like an angry hive of mechanical bees erupting from the deep. But what made this possible, the ability to launch FPVs from dozens of kilometers away, was a sophisticated signal relay system. You see, Ukraine couldn't control drones directly from Odessa to Crimea. That's technically impossible. The curvature of the Earth and distance make radio signals vanish after just a few miles. So instead, they built a smart relay network, Ursula-class unmanned boats, anchored 10 to 20 kilometers offshore, functioning as floating repeater stations. They extended FPV control range far beyond Russian radar coverage. Each vessel functioned as a mobile broadcast station, fitted with tall antennas, high-power transmitters, or even linked directly to Starlink terminals. Operators in Odessa simply sent encrypted instructions via internet uplink to these relay vessels, which then retransmitted the signals to nearby drones. The live video feed from the drones returned via the same path, drone to vessel, then vessel to Odessa, with near-instant latency. Because of this, Ukraine didn't need dozens of vessels to cover the 200-kilometer gap between Odessa and Crimea. Just 3 to 5 well-positioned relay ships were enough. They remained anchored at optimal distances to maintain signal stability and low latency, while long-range encrypted backhaul links handled the rest of the journey between controller and vessel. This layout allowed Ukrainian drone operators, sitting hundreds of kilometers from the front, well outside Russian missile range, to precisely maneuver drones deep inside Russian airspace, even while sipping coffee, connected via a floating Wi-Fi repeater bobbing quietly in the Black Sea. And even if the Russians discovered the source of the signals, they would be powerless to stop it. At 2:57, as dawn approached, more vessels appeared on radar. Each one launched its own swarm of drones, not in military formation, not triggering radar warnings, but rather as a silent mechanical rain, drifting toward shore. The drones didn't fly in a straight path. They scattered like panicked birds, each following a route that seemed random, yet all converged simultaneously on Mount Ape Dry. Coastal radars, programmed to ignore slow-moving civilian vessels, accidentally allowed the USVs, unmanned surface vessels, to glide quietly toward land. These USVs maintained low speeds, under 15 knots, mimicking ordinary fishing boats, and thus slipped past military classification filters. Within 2 minutes of a new launch, the lead drone of the second wave reached its target, the first radar dome. Externally, the dome was made of thick concrete and fiberglass, built to survive 5,000-pound bombs from high altitude. But Ukraine had found a weakness: the maintenance hatches at ground level. These hatches were rugged against overhead blast waves, but not against a shaped charge detonated at point-blank range. When the shaped charge detonated, a molten copper jet focused all its energy into a single pinpoint, drilling through reinforced steel like paper. The Nebo radar dome took the next hit. Its meter-wave radar, once hailed as capable of detecting stealth fighters like the F-35, was punctured clean through. Without Nebo, the S-400 batteries across Crimea lost their long-range early warning capability. Anything flying below 100 meters instantly became invisible to the region's entire air defense network. Worse still, the explosion created a plasma channel. Superheated material became near superconductive, drastically reducing resistance and allowing a massive electric surge to cascade through the system. Transmitters, modules, and comms bays short-circuited and exploded in seconds. The Podlet-K, one radar critical for monitoring low-level aerial approaches, suffered multiple hits to its signal relay bays and shut down shortly after. With Podlet-K one offline, the entire region went blind below 100 meters. Just a few kilometers away, a BK-16 Russian landing craft tried to retaliate with deck-mounted firepower, 14.5mm machine guns, and personal weapons. But they were firing at shadows. The drone assigned to strike it flew straight into the bow, ignoring all defensive fire, guided not by AI, but by physical GPS coordinate, and detonated on impact. Up on the mountain, the dominoes fell. No radar, no data links, no visibility. The result, a cascading failure across the entire air defense grid. The S-400s relied on Nebo for early warning. Without it, they could only see what's right in front of them. The Podlet 96L6E radars, tasked with short and mid-range target tracking, were either destroyed or on fire, cutting off the data flow needed to coordinate the entire defense network. The AP-Tree Command Station, the brain of the operation, took a direct hit. Servers melted, classified files incinerated, cables severed, data links simultaneously cut across the board. The final outcome? Every single link in the chain, from sensors to command to launchers, was broken at the same time. Acquisition radars had no data to pass to fire control radars. Fire control radars had no tracks to give to launchers, and missile batteries had no targeting data at all. There were no backups within 100 kilometers, meaning that, in a single blow, the entire short and mid-range air defense network for the region was completely paralyzed.